today's episode, I'm going to be talking about 5 specific everyday leadership habits that we can implement in order to completely transform a workplace. Sometimes I think we overthink leadership a bit, and we think of these leadership decisions being such big decisions. Requiring authority to make decisions, and it's a more formal kind of response to challenges in the workplace. But if you really think about it, our everyday actions and consistency with the little habits over time are really things that make greater change for us. It's not always the big decisions. So, what I want to talk about today are the things that are within your control, no matter where you are in an organization. If you are just getting started, you just joined a team, and it's your very first job starting out in your career, or if you've been someplace for a really long time and you're trying to impact change, it doesn't matter what role you find yourself in. The things that I talk about today, I really feel we can all do from wherever we are. If you go back to the very beginning of this podcast, you might remember that the entire mission of the podcast was to take leadership skills and apply them to everyday life. And you'll find that the things I'm talking about today really do apply to life outside of work as well. And they're little simple habits that if we just are more intentional with, can really make a big impact, really in any relationship that we have in general. So, as I go through this today, I want you to be thinking about how well you are doing at each of these things as it stands today, because I will tell you at the end of the episode, the branching out challenge is going to require you to pick one of the habits to implement. So I want you kind of reflecting on how you're doing in each of these areas as we go through this. So remember, these moments, the smaller moments in our day, can often be overlooked. But recently, I was talking to Rich Weller about how impactful small moments can be, and how they can become really important memories over a lifetime. And some of those, little things that you remember about when someone really believed in you. They showed that they believed in you, and you started to believe in yourself because of that. Just the little things that someone can say or do that stick with you. I just talked to Rich about that recently, and I feel like this goes so nicely with that. So let me dig into these habits and see how you think you are doing. So the first habit really is an important part of communication in general, and it's something I continue to have to work at because my self-regulation is a little bit of a challenge for me, and that is listening before responding. I just heard a grunt outside of the studio. I wonder why that is. At least I admit when I have challenges with things, and I don't pretend to have it all together, Mr. Matthew Bear. So most people, including me at times, listen to respond, not to fully understand. And I really do believe it's not because they don't care. It's because they have so much on their plate that they don't feel like they have time to slow down and really think about the thing and give it their full attention. So it's really a matter of multitasking and trying to quickly get through this conversation so that you can get back to other things. But we have to think about the message that is communicating unintentionally to the person that's trying to have a conversation with you. So if you are interrupting while they're speaking, that's going to communicate that you're impatient. You don't have time for them. You're dismissing them. You're making assumptions about what they're going to say, and you're just going to go ahead and jump in and save them some time. And that doesn't make a person feel good. And I'm fully aware of that. And I try to work on that because I too see it as, oh my gosh, it's slowing me down. I have this list of things to do. I know I have to get through them today. If I can shorten this process and jump to the end, then I'm going to be able to get back to my stuff. But that doesn't make someone feel valuable. It doesn't make them feel like what they have to say is important to you. So I want you to be thinking about, are you truly listening when someone is speaking, or are you a little dismissive? I know it's common too for people to be like working at their computer or something. Someone walks in to talk to them, and then they don't, break attention from the computer. They just continue to stare at what they're doing and maybe give a verbal response, but never actually make eye contact and give that person attention. That too is sending a terrible message. Um, how often are you interrupting without even realizing it? I used to do this really bad. And I actually think that I've improved because I'm a coach and I'm used to asking questions. Sometimes because I feel like people may be giving more information than I need in one area and not answering the thing that I feel I need to be able to help them. I almost feel like I have to try and redirect the conversation to save them time, because that's my job apparently. And so I will interrupt with a question. Um, but keep in mind too, that asking questions does make them feel valued because you're thinking about what they're saying enough to be able to ask a question. So it does make them feel valued, but the timing of it is important. It can't be an interruption to what they're already saying. So think about the way in which you're interacting with people and if they're feeling respected, if they're feeling heard. Because if you are able to consistently practice good listening, you are going to find that when you are around other people, meetings become more productive. You're getting more done in one sitting with people because you're not jumping to conclusions. You're allowing people to get their thoughts out, ask the important questions. They get clarity, they move more quickly. You're going to see fewer misunderstandings because fewer assumptions are being made, and people are getting clarity and the information they need to feel like they can move forward and take action on the things on their plate. People start to feel safer coming into a conversation with you because of this as well. So listening is so very important, and we want to make sure we're making it a priority. When people come to me and say we're having communication issues in our team, usually the number one thing that I'll say is we need to slow down the communication. So I think that that's worth highlighting. So it's a simple way that you can build trust with individuals. So I want you to be thinking about, is there someone on your team that might not be feeling heard right now? Maybe you know that you recently had an interaction with them and you could have done a better job at giving them your full attention. Or consider, when was the last time you slowed down enough to listen to someone to ask follow-up questions and prompt for more information? Matt does call me out on this one sometimes, where he is bringing up an idea to me, and before he even gets the entire idea out, I've already found a reason why it's not going to work. And he will say, well, you didn't even ask any questions. And I'm like, well, I knew everything I needed to know. That's actually not true, of course, but I am being honest that it is a challenge, especially for someone who is dominant and is trying to get to results quickly. So be reflecting on that one. I think it's a really powerful habit. That's why I chose it as number one. So for habit number two, I want to make sure we are giving credit where credit is due. And a lot of people feel that when they receive acknowledgement for a job well done, that it is a big motivator for them. They need to hear that what they're doing is having an impact. It's more than just a reward to an individual to get that recognition. It's actually showing to the team what you value. So if you publicly recognize a really good job done, you are pointing out the thing that you appreciate, the thing you wish to see. So that's basically defining what your expectation is. What does excellence look like? So it's showing what you value. It's showing what you define as success or quality, and it encourages other people to behave in the same way. Now, I'm going to preface this with not everybody appreciates public recognition. So you think you might be doing something really nice by recognizing them in a group setting, and they're actually really embarrassed by it and it's uncomfortable for them. So you might be putting them in an uncomfortable situation, but you're modeling for everybody else what behavior you hope to see, and they're kind of getting a clearer picture. So we have to be cognizant of what type of acknowledgement or appreciation someone might be looking for. So when someone contributes something really valuable, there's something that you notice, are you acknowledging it publicly, if appropriate, for that person? Or are you taking the time to pull someone aside and say what that thing is? Very direct feedback, not just like, great job, super proud of you, but giving that detailed feedback of what it is they did well. Or are you just assuming that they already know they did a good job? Again, it comes down to slowing down enough to give the recognition that people deserve. And we're moving quickly, and people are doing a lot for us all the time. And we shouldn't just assume that they know that they're appreciated. I try really hard to remember to show appreciation. Actually, I have to give a shout out to Bev Steitley, because she told me earlier this week that it's Employee Appreciation Day today when I'm recording. I would have not known that. I felt terrible the moment I heard it, but at least I heard it in advance of the day itself. I'm going to give a shout out to her. She is really good at always trying to recognize team members for a job well done. She is always very intentional about identifying how often she is going out onto the floor and giving praise to people, trying to make sure that the ratio of that positive feedback to constructive criticism is appropriate, always finding little ways to reward staff for what they're doing. So shout out to her for that. Maybe I can even use that as my leadership in the wild today. But I don't think I've actually met another leader who puts as much time and thought into the positive reinforcement slash rewards that they give to their team. So awesome job on that. So think about who is someone that's made a contribution recently around you that deserves credit, whether public or private. There are even ways around it. If the person doesn't like public acknowledgement, it depends on the size of the team and how you can get away with it. But you could always say that you've noticed that someone on the team has done blah, 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 and you just want to acknowledge that and you really appreciate it. You don't have to, call out the person. But if the team is small, obviously people are going to know who you're talking about. But let's make sure we're intentionally highlighting people's efforts, because that recognition not only motivates that person to continue, but it multiplies the motivation. It encourages other people to do a great job and work towards that recognition as well. So that is habit number 2. Habit number 3 is making sure you address challenges when they're coming up earlier rather than later. We want to address issues early. Having difficult conversations is something that comes up constantly with my clients. It continues to be a challenge for many people to hold someone accountable, to to sit down and have a conversation and identify the things where someone might be falling short. And that's because you want to maintain harmony. You want it to be a peaceful workplace. Of course you do. That's very important. But what you're doing by avoiding that conversation actually ends up causing further issues in the relationship, sometimes some resentment for the people and things you can never bounce back from. And it eventually gets to the point where you have to have the conversation, and things are so out of control at that point that it's just made the problem so much worse. So instead, don't allow that frustration to grow. Address an issue as soon as it comes up. Rather than going and talking to someone else about it, talk to that person directly. I'm sure for a lot of us, we have some small issue that we are just avoiding on a regular basis. We're ignoring, we're thinking it's going to go away on its own. If we just wait it out, it might go away. But what conversation do you need to have now that might prevent a bigger problem later? There's probably something, unless you're super comfortable with these conversations and you're taking the time to handle them up front. So remember, if you don't, you're going to notice that trust decreases. There's miscommunication. Resentment is building. There are so many bad things that happen when we put these conversations off. This was always a challenge for me back in the day. I'm much better about having difficult conversations now, but I always made the assumption that it would get better on its own, or I would tell myself that I was actually the problem, and maybe it was me and I was looking at it the wrong way, and I would just try to take responsibility myself rather than addressing it. So make sure that you are reflecting on those relationships that you have, and if there is anything that needs to be discussed that will help you in order to maintain trust that already exists or rebuild trust that has been broken down. So you want the person to think that the relationship matters enough to be honest even when it's difficult. So that is habit number 3. So we are being really great listeners. We are going to make sure we acknowledge a job well done, give people the recognition they deserve, and we are going to address issues early. Habit number 4 of 5 is we want to encourage growth in others. Imagine that I am talking about growth. One of the most powerful things that a leader can do is help someone to believe in themselves. If you think of some of the guests that I've had on and some of the stories that they've told, there's always this tendency to reflect on the people that believed in you when maybe you didn't believe in yourself, the thing that they said that stuck with you and really changed your perspective on what you could do and the impact you could have. Usually people can trace their growth back to someone that believed in them early on or even later on after a period of difficulty. So I want you reflecting as I go through this on who is on your team that maybe has potential that they don't see on their own just yet. They need some support in seeing that they need someone rooting for them and kind of challenging them to try the difficult things, to step outside their comfort zone for growth. We know that if we just continue to do the same thing and what's comfortable, we're not growing. I think I've talked about it in an episode before. Like as a kid, growth happens naturally, right? You're learning all these new skills, you're physically growing over time. But when it comes to this growth process that I'm talking about, without being intentional about it, some of that growth just becomes stagnant. So when I talk about encouraging growth here, I'm talking about giving people the constructive feedback. I've heard a lot lately about some of the people who see the value in giving constructive feedback, but running into challenges when they're giving it to someone who's never received it before. So the person is very emotional or immediately puts a wall up or changes the relationship, or they're angry, they feel criticized, this emotional response to it because maybe it's not something that they've received in the past. But usually if you can get over that hump and help the individual to see that you are doing this out of care for them and because you see potential and you want them to reach that potential, and you're there to support them, then it can kind of transform the relationship. And it's funny because a lot of times some of those relationships start out that way where someone is being, I'll say, hard on you. Actually, I was just interviewing someone yesterday for one of my clients who's hiring, and the candidate was talking about, the impact that her very first leader had on her because she was so hard on her and had such high expectations and was very critical of her work, and what that actually did for her and developed her, and how at first she reacted to it versus how she sees it now, and the impact it had on her in her career. So we know that constructive feedback, it's just is important. It's just important what tone you use, and how you choose to deliver it. It could also mean encouraging growth, could also mean assigning new responsibilities that someone hasn't had before, really looking at what do they have on their plate right now, what is something just outside their comfort zone that they could try out, and empower them to start making some decisions in relation to that, allowing them to make some mistakes and learn from it as well. Asking reflective questions of the person, having them consider, areas of strength, areas for growth, really reflect on what their professional growth journey could look like, where they see themselves in the future. That is all encouraging growth in someone. So if we can identify someone around us that needs encouragement right now, whether it's because they've been having a difficult time, or that they just don't appear as confident as they should be because they don't realize all they bring to the table, maybe it's time to encourage some growth in them, because that can become the turning point for someone's confidence over time. All right, so that was habit number 4. Habit number 5 that can completely transform relationships, transform the culture in a workplace, that is being honest about your mistakes, taking ownership, being willing to be transparent when you have done something that you realize was actually, after the fact, not the best thing for your team or for the organization as a whole. Because if you are able to actually take responsibility for something, and show that you too are human and you make mistakes, it becomes more normal for people to admit their mistakes, for people to be held accountable for their mistakes. Accountability is important in the workplace. It goes back to the difficult conversations. If people can take ownership for the things that they're doing, and the mistakes that they're making, then that accountability piece from earlier, having that difficult conversation, that becomes a lot easier. People start to feel safer to admit their own errors if you are honest about yours, ones that you had back when you were maybe in that role that they find themselves in today. It makes them feel more comfortable about those as well. But people want to feel safe trying new things, coming up with new ideas, making decisions on their own, and it is going to help them to do so by hearing some of the things that you have going on and the mistakes that you've made. It really, some people believe that by admitting your mistake as a leader, that is going to weaken your authority. It's going to weaken your credibility. But I've seen time and time again, the moment that a leader steps forward and owns it, people gain so much respect for that person. It actually seems to have the opposite impact. It improves their credibility. It shows that, we're on the same level here. We're all human. And we need to support one another through mistakes. And learning increases. I've made this mistake. Here's the lesson I learned. I'm going to share it with you guys, so that you can learn from it too. So hopefully we can avoid that mistake in the future for you as well. So it can be very impactful. That's why I chose this one for today. So I want you to think about, how do you respond when you make a mistake? Do you acknowledge it openly? Do you try to quietly move past it before anyone notices? Do you try to cover it up? Because if you are not openly sharing that mistake with others, you are missing an opportunity for learning and helping others to grow, and another opportunity to build trust. So if you haven't noticed, all 5 of the habits that I mentioned have a connection. They all build trust. So when I talk about changing a workplace culture, I'm talking about how these small habits over time, just consistency in these areas, build trust. And if you do not have trust in your workplace, that's where things break down. A lot of organizations have me come in and talk about, if you've read before, the trusted leader, the 8 pillars of trust, where if one of those pillars is not strong, how things tend to break down. We need to find the root cause for the breakdown in trust and rebuild that pillar. Well, these 5 areas are things that help rebuild those pillars of trust. So, again, listening is going to build trust, recognizing other people for their contributions builds trust. Honesty and transparency in giving feedback to others is going to bring trust. Helping other people to grow, supporting them, showing them their potential builds trust. And finally, transparency in owning your mistakes is going to build trust and show accountability and responsibility. So all of it's connected to trust. So explore that idea of trust. What does trust look like in your organization right now? And which of these habits do you feel like comes naturally to you and you see yourself already doing versus which one might stretch you the most? The great thing about all of these habits, they're all free. You could choose to start them at any time. As soon as this podcast episode is over, you could start immediately trying to be intentional in that area. I love that none of these habits require a specific title, a role in an organization. Also, it applies outside of an organization. Think about it just in your family unit, how these habits apply. The listening, the honesty and transparency about mistakes and giving recognition and addressing issues early. All of these things apply to all relationships, not just in the workplace. So I go back to these podcast episodes are literally for anyone, wherever you are. I want you to be able to take this and apply it to everyday life, wherever these challenges are coming up. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, my branching out challenge for you is to pick a habit and just be intentional with it. They don't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Just be aware. Even if you just throw it on a little Post-it note and stick it next to your computer or next to your door frame for when you walk out the door or on your mirror. I don't care where you do it. Put an alarm on your phone. Remind yourself of these habits because they can make a really big difference. And what if everybody started practicing these habits? Imagine how our communication would transform and how much trust we would have in those around us. So I kind of mentioned it earlier in the episode, the leadership in the wild for today. I really did want to acknowledge Bev Steitley because she practices many of these habits, to be completely honest. I just said to Matt the other day, if I didn't have my own business, I think I would go work for Bev Steitley. And he says, you say that about like all the places that you go. That's true, but Bev is different. And I don't say it about all of the places. Just a lot of them, but for different reasons. But I really do believe she practices these habits. And if she notices that she's not doing a good job with one of these, I've noticed that she's very, very intentional about making the changes. I had the pleasure of being in her BNI group in Greencastle, Pennsylvania, and built a strong relationship with her there and got to observe her and observe the way she talks about her team and all the things that she does. And she's a loyal listener, so she'll probably get to hear this and know that she's an amazing leader, always striving for growth, and I really respect that. So Bev of Saunders Tax and Accounting out of Hagerstown, Maryland, I see you and appreciate what you're doing, and really need to invite you back for another episode, so hold me to that. Okay, I want to make sure that I take a moment to do Leadership Unscripted. If you have not listened to this podcast before, I do take submissions from our listeners of any challenges they might be facing so that we can talk about how we might approach this. And if I have a guest, I can get some other perspective. Well, obviously, no guest today, so it's just me solo, but here is the submission. We have a new leader above us, and everything is changing. Priorities, communication, even the overall tone. How do I help my team adjust when I'm still adjusting myself? All right, so first of all, if you've ever been in that situation, you know it's hard to be in the middle and know that you're getting these new expectations from above and you're trying to create stability for those around you that you're leading, and you're stuck right in the middle. And I couldn't help but think when I saw this prompt, this is why I chose it for today, how the 5 habits I would be talking about today would help someone in this situation. So let's think about the habits. So if everything is changing because there's new leadership, priorities, communication, and even tone is what this person said. All right, let's think. Start listening before responding. Listening to understand. Listening to understand the new leader and why they're making the decisions that they are, why they choose to approach things the way that they are, but also listening to understand what your team members are experiencing and why this might be such a difficult time for them right now. What concerns they have about the change, what feels most unclear for them at the time. So, slowing down enough to truly listen and understand and ask questions, think about the impact that that could have. So, that was habit number 1. So, habit 2, if you recall, is that recognition piece, giving recognition to others. Well, I could see giving recognition where people are adapting, where people are seeing this as an opportunity for growth and improvement and leaning into the change rather than resisting the change. We could recognize that, and people would notice and hopefully want to be a part of that as well. You're recognizing the behavior you want to see more of. You want people to lean into the change, even if it's hard for you too. Look at those that are able to, and maybe you can even learn something from them as well. The next one, number 3, addressing issues early. Well, whether the issue is the new leader and you need to sit down and have a conversation about how all these changes appear to be impacting your team and how you can work together to try and make the transition easier. Maybe that's the issue you want to address early. Maybe you want to address issues with those that are pushing back in inappropriate ways that are kind of stirring up issues within the team. Whatever it may be, the addressing issues early and constructively is going to make a difference. You need to have honest conversations about this with your team, what's changing, how it's impacting you as well, and that you are there to support them along the way. So, number 3 actually applies too. Number 4 from the tips I shared today was encouraging growth. Think about encouraging growth through this time of adjustment, helping people to see the opportunities that lie ahead, opportunities for people to push themselves outside of their comfort zone, get comfortable with change, get comfortable with a new communication style. All of those things encourages growth for the people around you and helps them to feel like you see potential in this, but you're not also being negative, and that there's hope for a better future because of the changes. And then finally, habit number 5 is that ownership that you take when you make mistakes, that accountability piece. So I think it's just, even if it's not a mistake, but taking ownership of the fact that you are struggling too. Being transparent, not having to have every answer immediately, being honest when you don't have answers. Maybe you can say, I'm still learning this. I'm still trying to figure out what direction we're going in. I will communicate with you when I have information. I think that just level of transparency, even though it's not a mistake that you're owning, I think the habit of taking accountability, responsibility, ownership could be powerful here as well. So with all of these little habits that I mentioned today, I feel like this person could really use them themselves, and it would help their team adjust as well as help them navigate the changes that are occurring. So hopefully that's helpful. I've been trying to choose challenges that connect a little bit to the episode so that you can see application of what I'm talking about in a real life situation. So hopefully that's helpful for you. And hopefully our listener found value in that. Thank you for submissions that you send in. If you have a leadership challenge you're facing, you can send it into info@branchingoutpodcast.com. We would love to talk about your challenge. And if you have a recommendation of an episode topic, we would love to do that too. If you're interested in being a guest, we are booked out pretty far, honestly, through the end of the season. So we're already looking at season 3, which is exciting and kind of hard to believe. But we would love to receive an application from you if you think that what you have to share would be a good fit for the podcast. There is a guest application on the website at branchingoutpodcast.com. We are still looking for sponsors who want to get involved, whether it's, you want to have some ads on the podcast, or you want to be a recurring guest on the podcast and get the word out about what you're up to and how it might align with our brand and our mission through the podcast. We'd love to hear from you, or if you have a recommendation of someone for us to connect with. Remember that we have an episode drop every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So if you're not subscribed and you're not getting those notifications, be sure to do so that you remember to check us out and see what we're up to. Lots of exciting things coming up as we are planning our next Tri-State Leadership Summit. We actually have selected our speakers behind the scenes. We're getting some really cool things in place, really elevating the experience. So you might get to look forward to meeting some of the folks involved in the experience for 2026 as well. So hopefully you found value today. These habits, I feel like, are things that we can implement with little effort. It doesn't take a lot of time, a lot of energy, just a little intentionality. Yeah, I couldn't help but use that word, intentionality. Sorry, Matt. So hopefully you feel like you are equipped to start really making a difference in the relationships, whether in the workplace or outside the workplace. Until next time, keep branching out.